all? Hello, can you hear me now? Okay. So, PyConf Hyderabad, wake up please. We're going to end, but yeah, after some time. You have to bear me for some time. So, you already had a little bit of introduction about me. I'm going to talk a little bit more. Whoa. So, my name is Kushal Das. I'm a code developer of the C Python project. That is the Python programming language you are using. It's a free software project. That means you all can contribute to the language itself. I'm also part of this organization called Python Software Foundation. How many of you know about Python Software Foundation? Please raise the hand. For the rest of you, to give you an idea, it's a non-profit. We help to promote, to advance, and to protect the programming language called Python, correct? You know about Python. Say yes or no, come on. Yes. So we also help to grow the international diverse community around the programming language Python. And we are open for getting more members. Right now we have 7,400 plus basic members, and you can be a member too if you just go to that URL python.org/account/signup and create an account. And later you'll figure, if you just read the site, you'll figure out there are other kind of membership. Like if you are an individual, you can become a sponsor. If you are a company, you can actually become a sponsor to the whole project itself. And you can be a voting member so that you can take a decision in the community how the community will grow. But all of those are a part of my voluntary work, and right now I'm working as a staff in the Freedom of the Press Foundation. So this is another non-profit based in US which helps to protect the journalist in the 21st century. We use technologies like and ideas like crowdfunding, digital security, and internet advocacy to help and protect journalists and whistleblowers. My Twitter handle is @KushalDas, just in case anyone wants to tweet, etc. So you already had 2 keynotes today. This is the last one, and I'll be talking about a little bit more about history part. So I have a question for all of you. What is free software? Can anyone just shout, what do you know about free software? What is free software? Free like a? Free as in freedom, correct. Anything else? Do you know about the term open source? Do you? Yes or no? Some loud, please, wake up. So, but before the term open source came up, this thing came as free software. What is free software? So, as many people shouted here, free, the word free stands for freedom. It is not about the money. And if a software is a free software or even open source software or not, that is decided by the license of the software. I was discussing with some people yesterday night, and out of the discussion one thing came up, that what if we push some code to GitHub, whether that's an open source or free software or not. That's a question we get to know from many people. Don't think that it's only you ask. So what is the answer? If I push some code today to GitHub, is it an open source or free software? Yes or no? Tell me. Why? Software license. That will decide whether a software is a free software or not. So generally the free software gets 4 freedoms, correct? If anyone knows, freedom to run, freedom to study about the source code, freedom to redistribute the source code. And the 4th freedom is about to modify the source code and then redistribute along with the same license. That if you are smart enough to give a modified copy to your friend should be able to redistribute it again. Now, I started my talk with free software because this talk is going to be the history of free software and the hacker culture. The next thing is actually a couple of tweets which happened in June. GNOME Foundation, how many of you know about the project GNOME? Again, raise your hand. So you know what GNOME is. I don't have to explain. So they did a tweet about the US travel ban. And I don't know if you can read. Can you read this one? I don't know. So this is an image, screenshot of the tweet. So there they talked about the Travelman or how they feel about it, and many people thought that's bad. GNOME is a software project, correct? Yes, no? So they thought, no, you are a software project. You are not supposed to talk about it. You are a free software project. Talk about free software. Why are you talking about travel ban? Now, to counter that, many people actually tweeted back, and one of the major tweet was from the guy Miguel Diaz. He is the founder of GNOME project. So he particularly said, GNOME and free software are political movements. They happen to SIP software. Okay? This is maybe new to many of you. You think that open source, free software, all of this is only about software. No, it's about freedom. It's about being part of a movement. So, rest of the talk, most part, the history. Oh, I should go here. I'm going to go back as 1950s. Okay? This place, can anyone recognize where is, or which building is this? MIT, correct? So we are going back in 1950s back to MIT. This is a part of a particular computer known as TIXO, TX-0, how you write it, TX0 I believe. So this is the time when the computer used to be mammoth in size, like full one room. So this particular machine had 64 kilobyte of memory, which is a lot if you think in 1950s. It was part of a particular building known as RLE, which later on became the AI lab, where most of this innovation happened. When this computer came in, the computer was being used for some particular people of the lab. Only they had access. But there were many other people nearby in that building who wanted to access the computer. So what they started doing, they started waiting in that same lab just outside till very late night. For example, you had to pre-book, correct, to get an access to the computer. Many times it happened that people booked for 3 a.m., they never showed up. So whoever was waiting outside, they said, hey, nobody came, can I go and use it? So they started using it. That's how people started getting access to a computer like this, and that's how a new generation of people, or new thinkers came up. And this is the same time, this whole idea of hackers, the hackers ethic, everything started coming up on. Working on these machines was something special. It's not like modern time when everyone has a computer or more than one computer in their house, correct? It used to be very difficult. So they started talking about how to work actually on the computers, how to get access to those computers. So this particular computer never came with a software. That came from a hardware company. So the people, the hackers, the first generation hackers, they actually started building the whole system software. They wrote the assembly, they wrote everything. So their idea was that all information should be free. If you don't know how something is working, you cannot work on top of that. And the code used to be written in paper tapes. And the idea was, if you are working on particular software, when you are going back home, you take out the tape, your code, take out the drawer and put the code in the drawer. So the next person who is coming in, he or she can take out the same code from the drawer and start working on top of whatever you worked on. So this is the sharing idea, correct? You are sharing your code from the very beginning. People cannot, keep reinventing the same thing again and again. That's how they started working on. And this is also became a part of some idea which is about a decentralized system. So there are stories where people really freaked out the sysadmins, whom we call nowadays, they used to call high priests, because only some people were allowed to touch the computer, because those are $1 million computers, correct? So, and then there is other group of hackers who always came up with the nicer ideas to how to get access to those computers. And their whole motto was that we should not judge people based on how they look or where are they from. Instead of that, people should be judged based on their work. And all of this change suddenly became very fast with the introduction of a new computer. From the deck, this is the computer PDP-1. And as you can see in the image, the size of the computer is much smaller, correct? The price was also smaller. If I remember correctly, the price was around 120K USD back then, not millions of dollars. And it was much faster computer compared to TX0. And as soon as the computer came in, the same group of hackers started working on the assemblers, the system programs. This computer came with an operating system, but the people who were in charge, they said, oh, we don't like that assembler, we'll write our own. So a couple of the lab folks, they asked the person in charge that, hey, can we write the new assembler over a weekend? So apparently, I think 6 or 7 people sat down in a weekend, Friday, Saturday, actually Saturday and Sunday, and by Monday morning when the in charge was back in lab, they already wrote the new assembler. And it is being told that the same work can only be done by a company in a couple of months, the amount of work they did. So they slept in turns, they kept working on the system to make sure that they have the assembler they want. So of course, every story has something to do with games, correct? In general. So the story of Tixo and then PDP-1 is obviously, again, more and more gaming ideas came in. So when these same people managed to create a connection between the old big computer and this PDP-1 in the next room, they actually connected both with a single wire, transferring 1 bit at a time. Okay, it's just 1 bit at a time. Then they invited Professor John McCarthy, the professor who invented Lisp programming language, asked him to come and sit in front of the PDP-1, the new computer, and told him, sir, we created this new game, chess, in computer. So you can play against computer, just that the computer will be slow to reply. Why? Because they got another professor and asked him to sit in front of the old computer and told him the same story. So both of them started playing the game against each other without knowing and thought that it's AI, the initial days, correct? AI, it's the AI lab already. But McCarthy was not happy about being so slow. So he started poking around the computer, found the wire, and followed it to the next room and found the professor sitting there. So stories of hacking. Next big thing, spaceware. How many of you know about this game? It's a game. It's the first ever recognized video game or computer game ever written. So one of the hackers who worked on that big computer was Steve Russell. He always had this idea from the science fiction books that he will create a software where 2 spaceships will keep fighting. That was his idea. And he kept sharing the idea to every other hackers. And in general, this is the way free software groups or the community work. If you suggest something, that means people will make you volunteer to do so. So he suggested about a game, so everyone said, hey, you are suggesting, so you should write this game. But he was a lazy person on of his own world. So he said that, oh, I need better sine and cosine functions. Correct, source code, you know, module, function, libraries. So he said, I need those code. I cannot write a game for display. So there was another guy called Kotak. He said, wait, I will get you those code. So he actually drove down to the company who makes this PDB-1, their city, and asked around the engineers, hey, anyone has a sine cosine function code? So someone gave him a roll of tape. Here is the code, go back. He came back and asked Steve Russell, this is the sine cosine function, now you have to write the code. So they kept working and working for months. And they finally got this particular game up. So later on, if you search on your browser about Space War, you can find a JavaScript emulation and you can play this game on your browser now. And as soon as this game came up, more and more people started interested in this computer thing. People used to stand in a queue with Coke whole night. People were used to put bets, who's going to make more score, correct? First game. Now, we'll jump a little bit ahead, 1970s. Anyone tell me who is this guy? Can anyone tell me? Yes, but you can say it loudly. Richard M. Stallman, RMS. So he was a freshman student in Harvard, which is a nearby place from MIT, and he heard that there is this nice thing in MIT called AI Lab, where you can go and access computers. There's not much, restriction. So one day he decided over a weekend to go and check out this lab. And instead of only checking out, he also got a job offer. By then, PDP-11 and PDP-10 were the two major computers versions. So he got a job to write a PDP-11 thing for PDP-10. It's an emulation. So he was really interested into this MIT lab. So he started spending more time, weekends, nights after nights. And this is again the same time when more and more people were around the AI lab and they were forming up this hackers group. So just like the college, whoever is from college days right now, who are in college, just like you all, they also used to hack whole night. Who all here like Chinese food? Any hands? Chinese food? I can see only few. They also like Chinese food. So around 3 a.m. they used to go out in a car, a couple of cars, go to the nearest Chinese restaurant, eat and discuss everything about the world, come back and hack again. That was their lifestyle. They used to stay in the lab, work, build new things. But at the same time, getting access to the computers were a little bit difficult, correct? Sometimes the professors used to lock doors to the terminal. So what they started doing, they're figuring out how to go through these vents, get into the professor's room, open the door, start accessing the computer, give the code to run, then climb back and get out again. Or they used to use wares and very other methods to get access. So these are the early days again of hacking. But as I said, this is 1970s, so new operating systems started coming up and many of them started having in quotes security features. So the computers, this is the AI lab, but the computer science department decided to use a different operating system which has a password-based authentication. So you have to type a password. This is 1977 in particular. Stallman managed to get access to that source code. So he wrote another software which parts the whole database of like passwords and found out the passwords, and he emailed each and every employee whose password he found, and it was kind of a text like, hey, we found that your password is this. So why don't you use a carriage return, that is press enter and log in. So almost 1/5 of MIT staff actually started using empty passwords so that more and more people can get access. And this is the same time people obviously started writing more code, and it was you can type code in the computer itself directly, not through paper tapes. One such editor was Teco, where you cannot see the file you are editing. You have to directly write the edit commands and edit that particular file. But this was kind of difficult. So, while doing so, working on that particular editor, RMS also found another feature called Control R. So if you press these two key characters together, Control and R, it will give you an option to run a macro, and you can write various things. So he started looking on to this thing and working on it. One of the features he wrote was to use the whole computer screen. Before that, this particular editor was only using 5 lines on the top, not the whole screen. So he made that as a big feature. And another person named Guy Steele in the lab took this particular macro thing and said, I will collect the best macros in the nearby universities and I will combine them into a single package. RMS heard about it and thought that this is a very nice idea. Why shouldn't we work more on it? And this idea became something known as Emacs, editing macros. How many of you are Emacs user right now? So this is the birth time when Emacs started, and it came up with a particular license idea from RMS that if you are an Emacs user, if you make some improvement, you have to give it back to RMS so that he can distribute to everyone else. But in the same time, in all of those old operating systems, we have a new operating system, Unix. Do you know who are these two guys? Ken Thompson, correct. So this picture is most probably the time when they were writing the C programming language. This is not the time when they wrote Unix, but this is the picture I found, so I'm using it. So they built something called Unix, another new operating system, and there are many other universities who also got very much hooked into this Unix world. But the idea was that you have to get an access permission from AT&T, the people who had the license authority over the source code. So even though Berkeley, the university, had made their own Unix, but to get BSD, the Berkeley distribution, you have to first show them a license from AT&T, then only they will be able to give you to access. Anyone knows this hardware? Anyone? It's a Lisp machine. So in the AI lab, this is the big thing at that moment. So Lisp machines were particular hardware where the Lisp programming language can run directly on the hardware. They were extremely fast, perfect for doing the AI work at that time. So MIT made these particular machines and then gave access to two different companies, Symbolics and LMI. So Symbolics is the company which got external funding. So just like modern days, because they got external funding, they managed to hire 14 of the lab people and became this big company. And the other side, the people who actually created the Lisp machine, they were part of the LMI. So two different organizations. The idea was, if you improve the Lisp machine, the language, you return it back to MIT, and then both the organizations can share the code and idea. But somehow, the salespeople of the Symbolics team did not like the idea. Why does LMI going to use the things we are developing? So in 1982, actually that was the day, March 16, RMS birthday, they decided, no, from now on, we will not allow you use our code. And that made RMS very angry. He became in a certain level of anger that he said, if it happens, I'm going to punish Symbolics for this myself. So what he started doing, that he started reading about the features of the code, what Symbolics is adding. So, and writing the same thing in Lisp, the MIT Lisp, and giving it back to LMI. So one way there was like this 14 best hackers of the world, and the other side there is one hacker, RMS alone, and he was supporting LMI every way possible, which went up to certain level that the Symbolics folks, the sales folks, again installed spyware to his terminal so that they can record and see what RMS is doing. Then they complained to the management that, hey, this guy is stealing all our ideas. But the management saw all the code and said there is no match at all. So RMS was free to continue his work. So he became even more angry, and he said, to help LMI from now on, I will not even read the source code. I'll just read the documentation and figure out how it is done. So there was a tension obviously built in the AI lab. One way RMS became the biggest hacker at that time because he was implementing the things which a company cannot implement in few weeks. He was doing it overnights. But that also affected the personal relationship. So always remember this, that at the end of the day, we are human who are interacting using the software. To give you an idea, I told you about the people going out for dinner, correct, at the night. So there are cases where people actually lied to RMS, saying we are not going to dinner because otherwise RMS would come with them. So that was the extreme case of people. So that was the time RMS, as I said, became the one of the most well-known hacker. But this is just, we are talking about companies and things related to AI lab. But at the same time, there was the other operating system and companies coming up. People started making money out of software, not the hardware. So the whole world the software world was changing. So around 1980s, RMS wanted to print another 50 pages of a document, which he couldn't. So he thought that he can just go and get the copy of the source code of the printer and fix it. The printer was from Xerox, by the way. And he was not allowed to do so because there was no source code, proprietary software. There was a professor in CMU who had access. He went and asked for it, but the professors were under NDA, so he couldn't give it to him. So that made him really the last stage of anger, and he left his MIT job to start this, like, okay, this is RMS in the modern days, if you never saw his picture. He started this thing called GNU project. So he wrote an email saying, hey, I'm starting this project called GNU, for GNU is not Unix. And this will create a clone kind of for Unix. I mean, basically the word is Unix compatible software, which will be given for free to everyone. And while working on this in 1984, he also founded FSF, the Free Software Foundation. And they started writing the software, like they first created the GNU Emacs. And while working on Emacs, they find out that they have to need a better license, and they worked on the license text. And in 1989, they released GPL version 1.0. And they also wrote the initial versions of all the software we are using. Make, the bash. You know about bash, correct? You write bash scripts, the shell commands. So they started writing various small parts of the operating system. All of these things started coming out together. And a few minutes back, they talked about the FSF in India, correct? So that's the same FSF. And while these things were going on, there is a little story about a kernel. So in 1991, a Finnish student, Linus Torvalds, he wrote a mail saying, hey, I made a hobby project. That's a kernel, it's a hobby kernel. But suddenly that project grew large. And now we know that almost all of us are using it some way or other. That became the Linux kernel, and it just filled up the thing which was missing from the GNU project, the kernel. So people started using the GNU software and the kernel together, which we know these days as Linux, or sometimes as we call it GNU Linux. And by the way, the Linux released with the GPL license. In 1998, you know this logo? Anyone? Open source, correct? You all know the term. So in 1998, a couple of free software folks met in Palo Alto and founded this new initiative called OSI, Open Source Initiative. The one thing to remember, Christine Peterson, she suggested the term open source. That part is actually missing in many history notes. That you can go to opensource.org and read it there. Open source, the reason we all are here, correct? Now I'm coming to 2017. Do you think everyone knows about open source or stuff? Yes, no, anything? Everyone is very sleepy, I understand. I'll finish fast, don't worry. So my answer is something from Hyderabad, which I noticed 2 days back. This is in the roads of like Hyderabad, open source, correct? So that means we won one part of the battle. People now know the term open source. May not be the free software, but at least they know the open source. So this is up to a certain level where we can say that people started learning about how open source work, how free software as a community work. Yes or no? Yes? You are using open source, correct? You are using free software, various forms. But what next? Till now, what I said about history, what next? What is there? Like if every one of us are using open source, if every one of us are going to write a free software, then what next? This is one of the major things. I don't know how many of you actually followed the Supreme Court, I should not say drama, but one of the biggest court case we ever had for citizens of India. And Supreme Court finally said that privacy is a fundamental right for every citizen. So this comes down to the same point where FSF or GNU project or the whole free software movement started. This is part of it. So remember this thing, as an Indian citizen, that privacy is your right. So it's on you how you want to protect it. And using and developing free software, open source software, will help you to do so. How? I'm just going to talk about a couple of projects in future. Before we go in, how many of you here have an Android phone or an iPhone? Please raise the hand, Android or iPhone. Okay, almost all of you. So help yourself and open up the apps, install the first project if nothing else. The name of the project is Signal, S-I-G-N-A-L. It's from Open Whisper System. It's a communication software. It's like WhatsApp, which I believe all of you use. But Signal is the most secure way of communicating right now. Make sure that if you share any information to your friends, to your family, share photos or stuff, use Signal. And also, it's better if you create that as a disappearing messages, that the messages will be deleted in future. What is the next logo? Anyone? Use Tor. It's not illegal. It will help you to make sure that nobody knows nobody nearby knows what are you actually browsing. People, it's not totally anonymous. You have to do take some other measurements. And the last and one of the most difficult thing is GNU-PG. I'm saying difficult because even though that works, it's difficult to use even for me. But from the documents someone leaked, we know for sure that GNU-PG or GPG works. People are yet to break that encryption. So if you have to protect any information, say your bank documents, say the information related to finance or your travel documents, use GNU-PG, use to encrypt. How many of you keep stuff in an external hard drive or use USB drives? For that, use full disk encryption. It's available in each and every operating system. If you encrypt your drive, that will guarantee that, with a longer passphrase by the way, that will guarantee that if you lose your pen drive or if you lose your hard drive, nobody will be able to extract things. But I'm just talking, correct? Not showing you how to do that. So this particular guide will help you to learn that. It is from another organization, EFF, the Surveillance Self-Defense. Remember the URL, ssd.eff.org. It should be your job to go back home tonight and read about it. It has step-by-step explanation on each operating system on how to use all of these different technologies to protect yourself. And if you think this is only me, Kushal Das is talking about this, actually this is not the case. So here is the text from RMS talk, his quote, which he said last year in a conference. It's about whistleblowers, that if we want to find what the state is doing so that we, the people, can have control over it, we need to make whistleblowers safe. So you can understand that the person who was talking only about free software and GNU in his life, he is also talking about making sure that the people are protected. Our journalists, our whistleblowers are protected. So here is another free software project called Secure Drop. It's from the foundation where I work. It's a Python project, by the way. It's a very small Flask web application which can be, which actually being used by news organizations so that people can safely submit information which can be used by journalists to write bigger stories. But all of it, what I'm saying is actually words. Nothing will matter unless you take a step on these things. It's on all of you to start writing free software code. It is on you to make sure that you protect your privacy. And as this conference, as you saw from the last 2 days, that we can only grow as a community. We cannot grow as a single person. So we have to work together. We have to share knowledge together. And I hope this conference helped you to learn many new things. At least for me, yes. I learned many new terms which I have to go back and search about. So you can also be very much excited about doing things, about free software, and help yourself. I'll share my the link to my slides, and there we have an article. I wrote it along with my wife Anvesha about the same history part, and that's my website where I write random things about free software and life, and that's my Twitter handle once again. I'm ready for any questions in next few minutes. I have few more minutes, and thank you for this opportunity. I can see some hands, so can you get some few mics?
Thanks, Kushal, for the awareness of free software. I have a primary doubt, like how to ensure when I do pip install, I am installing right module, or is it a genuine module? Because recently I have heard like there is a URL lib module which has been rogue module that is in the metadata.
Not URL lib. So what happened was the story was that there were a few people who figured out that they can get anything installed in other people's computer by finding the names similar to the very famous project names. So you do a spelling mistake. You type two characters like what do you say, the opposite way, and you can get some really bad code on your computer. So one of the things happened was like in PyPI itself. Now we have a feature that if you try to upload a project which has a similar name to the standard library, it will not allow you to do so. That's a feature got added with thanks to Donald Stapp and the rest of the community. And the other thing is completely human. Again, it's nothing to do with computer. You have to very much make sure that what you are typing and have more than one eyes to review, at least the requirement.txt and things. And one of the point which I did not mention was make sure you are using HTTPS every place and you are getting from the right source. Like which I don't know how many of you do in general, but many times many projects will ask you to install things from internet, like copy the source code and run it as root and things will magically get installed. Don't do that. You don't know what is happening on that source code. Bad idea, but that's my answer. Any other questions, anything? Okay.
Hi, I'm Bhanu. I was wondering, what do you see any momentum towards privacy and in terms of how AI is being trained to answer specific questions? We have seen how badly Aadhaar was mismanaged. We have seen data leaks and other verification issues. Have you seen people coming to you and talking about it, or what is the sense in the Indian industry? Thanks.
So I know about many people, and I'm one of them. My whole family is actually one of them who is like this way of destroying our privacy through a project called Aadhaar. And I know so many people are talking, finding out the issues with it. I don't know any direct connection where people used AI to find issues or solving things. So I'm not the right person to answer that. Sorry, I don't know anything. There is a hand there. So GPL is the formal license from the Free Software Foundation. There are these permissive licenses like MIT, BSD and things. So one of the things to remember that your license will decide what kind of people will use your project. So it can, whether a company can use for commercial product or not, that will be decided by your license. So you have to choose very carefully what license you are choosing.
GPL license kind of.
So there is a website called choosalicense.org, I believe, from GitHub, or .com rather, from GitHub. So you can have a look, and licensing is not something I can explain, and I should not explain because I'm not a lawyer. So get help from the right people. Anyone else, or I think done? Thank you.